What you're seeing are some drops from a new map farming strat I've cooked up that does not use any cartography scarab of multitudes. It doesn't use 4-disc scarab, so you're not out here running 16 mod maps, and it instead primarily utilizes settlers, aka ores. You will easily reach the 1 tier 17 per map threshold with this strat if done right. It is, in my opinion, one of the best new strats added in this update, and will easily be a top contender for your tier 17 and 16.5 farms. It utilizes, in my opinion, one of the most underrated additions to the game with this patch, which is this Kalguuran Scarab of the Guarded Riches, and the mobs from the ores in your maps will be dropping an insane amount of maps. In my opinion, this is the strategy settlers should be ran with, so if you want to farm ores for your King's March, you do it while farming 4 maps. There is a lot to go with this strat. This might be a longer video than usual, so consider subscribing if it helps. I will share everything that I figured out with this strat. So what's the strat? It revolves around loading your maps with ores and using this new Scarab of Guarded Riches, which will then turn all of the mobs spawned by ores into at least magic. If anyone's seen any videos about currency making from this league, you'll notice a good amount of farms revolve around using magic mobs, which is what made me try out this Scarab. These magic mobs, when combined with more maps from tier 16.5 maps and the cartography Scarab of escalation, will net you more maps than you know what to do with. The fifth slot, it's a flex slot. You could do corruption scarabs for 8 mod farming. That's probably the one that I'd do if I went back and redid this. You could do the Kalguuran Scarab that smelts ore so you don't have to hire miners. For the purpose of this video, I did use one singular risk scarab for that fifth slot, but in the end it was overkill and I would recommend one of these two instead. But why is this strat good in the first place? Why use this over some of the other map farms out there? Well, it's much easier than what is likely the best map farming strat in the game, which utilizes 4-disc scarabs and 8 mod maps, so you're out there running 60 mod maps. It's also much cheaper to get going, as all of the settler scarabs used are cheaper than the risk and multitude scarabs. It reaches the threshold of 1 tier 17 per map, and over 1 tier 16.5 per map, and you're farming ores for your King's March, you're farming lost shipments, and the Black Knight boss fight, which has a 65 divine jackpot drop. It also in general just drops decent loot. I've had quite a few divine orb level drops from the ores themselves, so it's just overall a very well rounded strategy. So I ran 50 maps with these 5 scabs right here, rolled 70 plus more maps on my tier 16.5 maps, and I used the Settler's Craft, and that is the strat. I did not run any specific tier 16.5 maps, just random ones that I had. Also, if you're worried that this strat uses 16.5 maps, don't be, I dropped more than I used. And then I used this tree. It might look a little bit complicated, but it is not. It's pretty simple. We prioritize all of the settlers nodes. The wording on this one is weird. It says chance for your maps to have ore deposits, not chance for an additional ore deposit. So if you were to spawn ores from other sources such as scarabs in the map device, the wording on this would imply that it would essentially do nothing, but that's not the case. In the end, at 100% chance, this does guarantee an additional ore on your maps. We take this lost shipment node up here. I did do a video on lost shipments if you're wondering the type of loot that comes from that, but they can have some jackpot drops and they drop a good amount of tattoos, so that's why we take this. That video will be linked down below if you want to watch it. We come to the left and take these nodes right here. This node is again weird with the wording. It would imply that if you have more than 2 ore deposits guaranteed per map, it does nothing, but I have tested it and it seems like when this procs you will gain 1 additional ore in your map. In my opinion, the wording on some of these new nodes are pretty weird. We don't take Refiner's Bargain, it does nothing for us. We don't take Fortune's Favour because we don't want the rarer ores in our maps. If we come up here, you'll see that I favorited 2 ores, Bismuth and Crimson Ore. Let's break down the ore tier list for this strat. We want Bismuth because it is just a general more everything multipliers on our map. But if we take Fortune's Favour, then that increases our odds for Verisium, which we do not want. The 100% increased chance for ores to be Bismuth from this is enough anyway, so you'll be seeing it pretty often. You only get 1 per map, so it really doesn't take away from where the main juice will be coming from, which is the best ore, the Crimson Ore. This ore spawns way more mobs than any of the other ones. You'll have seen clips in this video by now of me gathering up the mobs from it and getting a ton of map drops. Crimson Ore is by far the best ore for drops. The issue is Crimson Ore sort of works as a mob spawner, and you can destroy that spawner and gimp your loot. So if your build has uncontrollable AoE, it won't be as good, but it'll still be pretty decent. What I do is at the start of a Crimson Ore, I'll gather the initial mobs, take it to one of the isolated pods, and then kill them. This usually causes the other pods to sort of sprout in a way and spawn even more mobs, and then I run over them, gather a bunch of mobs, and kill everything. That's how I would recommend running this. It sounds more complicated than it is. A big step down from those two is the next best one, Petrified Amber. It's a decent amount of mobs, and as always you'll get map drops from them, but you don't want to increase the chance of anything replacing your Crimson. Verisium is the worst one. It's too rippy for most builds fully charged, and it's not as good as the others half charged. And I'm not even going to try and pronounce that, but it just does not have enough mobs to warrant picking and increasing the chance of. Outside of that, the tree takes all of the quant in the center as usual, all of the map modifier effect as usual, Eater of World alters again for the map dupe chance, these nodes up here for increased chance to find tier 16.5 maps and memory tears, and then you use the rest of your points for all of the map nodes to again increase the map odds. This tree will be linked in the description as always. If I made any mistakes on this tree in the video, the correct one will be linked in the description below. Now on to memory tears and memory abilities. First off, all of this was ran in 16.5 maps, not memory tears. However, I did find 3 separate memory tears whilst running, which added up to around 20 maps. So in the end, if I was to run those with this strat, I could have knocked off Divine's worth of investment, and I would have gained more because of the memory alters. I'm not sure if those alters affect the cartography scarab of escalation. You can see right here the modifiers are put onto the maps, but they're not put under the implicit modifier map. If it does work, that would be extremely broken. That is something to test out for sure. So which memory abilities are good and how do you use them? Well, there are a couple you want to watch out for. The memory of impulsiveness, which causes dropped equipment to turn to gold, when used on the ore deposits will grant you gold explosions similar to using a gilded allflame. I started with around 3 million gold and I ended with 5.2 million after 50 maps, so you can see this is also extremely good for gold. The revive on death one is always good. I would absolutely save those for your crimson ores if you look into that skill, and the one that grants 200% increased quant or 90% reduced is a gamble, but it will likely net you more maps in the end. The rest are whatever, unimportant to the strat. So in the end, how much did I make? I won't bother showing Wealthy Excel since its prices are all over the place and it doesn't show 16.5 maps yet, I believe. So here's a quick docs I made. Just to preface this, I did not run this strat with making money in mind. It was just to get the data on its potential. So there are a lot of ways for me to get this money way up, and I'll talk about that in a bit. But even though I wasn't min-maxing for currency gains, I still made a nice amount competitive with a lot of other strats. You can see my investment here on the left. Roughly 2400 chaos, which is around 15 divines. You can see the right my loot. I separated maps and everything else, but the thing we care about are the maps. I got 55 tier 17 maps, which means I averaged more than 1 tier 17 per map. 68 tier 16.5 maps, and I separated the favoured from non-favoured since a good layout is worth more. I did not factor in the price of regular tier 16s and uniques, since in my opinion those are not worth selling, but I of course included it so you know how many we dropped. In the end, from 50 maps, we dropped 1,103 maps. With 4 Void Stones, you have a 6.4% chance for a map to turn into a tier 17 when dropped. So that's around 1 in every 16 map drops will turn into a tier 17. We averaged 22 map drops per map, which is way higher than the needed 16 to average 1 tier 17 every map. Because we overshot as much as we did, you could easily drop the Risk Scarab or even a Kalguuran Scarab and include the Corruption Scarab and still average 1 tier 17 per map. This would then bump your chaos made by 1 to 2000, since at that point all of these maps that I didn't give a price would be 8 mods worth selling. You'd have slightly less, maybe a couple hundred, but it would still average out to a couple thousand more chaos probably. On the right, we dropped a good amount of valuable loot even outside of maps. All 5 of my divine drops were from ore mobs. I'm actually curious to see how good these ore mobs would be if I was using currency and scarabs instead of maps. Combined with memory tears, they might get pretty crazy. It might be something I test out before the end of the league. So in the end, within 50 maps, I farmed over 1100 maps, over 1 tier 17 map per map, over 1 tier 16.5 map per map, made 37 divines profit, left a lot of room for improvement, farmed over 2 million gold, a boatload of ores, lost shipments and memory tears, all while using a cheaper and easier setup than the other map farming strats out there. The 9 divines profit an hour could easily have been pushed to 12 plus an hour, and 1 divine profit per map if I was to run that corruption scarab and use my memory tears as I got them, since that would have not only lowered my investment but increased my loot too. In the end, I'd recommend for you to drop the risk scarab for the corruption scarab, or if you want to do King's March, the scarab that smelts your ores. You will get less maps, but overall the amount of maps you get will still be above the needed threshold to average one tier 17 map per map. I'd run memory tears as you get them and focus on getting quantity from those altars, and that is pretty much everything you need to know. And that's the video. I'm pretty happy with how this strat turned out, and I think it's going to be a good addition to anyone's sort of farming arsenal. If there's any important info I forgot to say about this strat, I will make sure to include it down below in the description. I usually make my description as descriptive as possible because I feel like I may not get everything across very well in my videos, and also I know that some people might struggle to understand my accent. If you got this far, a sub would be greatly appreciated, and I hope this farm goes well for you.